Hello and welcome to the Spark of Ages podcast. To close out the year, we are doing a special roundtable discussion on go-to-market, along with some thoughts and predictions for 2025 and beyond. We have three amazing guests, two of whom have already been on our podcast. John Miller, who has 25 plus years experience at the world's most innovative marketing technology platforms. Currently, John is founder and CEO of a stealth B2B tech startup. Maybe he'll reveal what it is today. Previously, he was CMO of Demandbase, which he joined as part of merging with his startup Engagio. And before that, he co-founded Marketo, where he, as the CMO, brought incredible thought leadership, drove category leadership and adoption, and helped the company go public. And John was our first Spark of Ages episode guest. Abi Ingle is a C-suite executive with a proven track record of success in launching and growing multi-billion-dollar businesses. With extensive experience in go-to-market strategy, digital transformation, and AI, ML, AI, and machine learning, Abi has held leadership positions at AT&T and Qualtrics. He's currently serving as a board member, startup advisor, C-suite consultant, and angel investor. And he was episode 13. Mike Nee is the CMO of OpenPrize. Mike specializes in driving growth for early stage SaaS companies and brings expertise in product strategy, go-to-market execution, and RevOps-enabled journey orchestration, leveraging AI and data-driven insights to optimize customer engagement. Now, since Mike's not been on the show, I should at least give you a little bit about his background. He has the trifecta. He's the guy that all moms want to have their daughters marry, having gone to MIT, Stanford, and Harvard.
You know, it's just my tagline should be overeducated, underutilized. I guess that should just be my tagline going forward.
Mike is the guy that all the Asian kids hated because, everybody pointed to him.
It's just mom bragging rights. That's all I did it for. Mom, just for mom.
So I'm so glad to have you here. This is our first format where I get to have these three amazing guests who are thought leaders and will talk to us all about AI, marketing, sales, all kinds of good stuff. So here's the first question. Is marketing becoming irrelevant? Many B2B organizations are moving towards this notion of a unified revenue operations function with AI taking over many tactical execution tasks. Should marketing leaders rebrand themselves, as John would say, chief market officers, to signal a more strategic focus, or will the function potentially be absorbed by others?
Marketing is not going to go away, is I think the first and the short answer, but I do think marketing is going to change. I think as we're going to talk about on the podcast today, the way what works in marketing is rapidly changing, just at the same time as AI is changing how people can market and how people can buy. And I think the result is that things like brand and relationships and experiences are beginning to become more important than ever in marketing. And that's just a fundamentally different discipline than sales. Right. So so it maybe it all rolls up to one organization, but I think we are going to continue to have the function of marketing that has a senior most marketing person. I don't think that goes away. Now, focusing on things like brand and relationship experiences is not, by the way, giving up on marketing's impact on revenue. Right. Anything but. Right. It's actually recognizing that true, sustainable, long-term revenue comes from having those things. So it's really more than anything else a change of the mindset of how we think about marketing departments. It's moving away from what I call ball machine mentality, where you think of marketing as simply budget in, MQLs out, and is this like more complex function that comes down to really setting the preconditions for long-term revenue growth.
Look, I agree with what John said, right? That marketing as a function, like a role, has not gone away. The contours of the organizational structure, which were very rigid before, with these deep silos between the different departments, whether it's marketing, sales, customer success, you name whatever the next stages might be, have by necessity to actually blur. And I think as people move to more digital buying, as other channels kind of start to take over, how you prosecute your go-to-market, I do agree with John that the recognition or the the brand that a company has is going to play a more important role. And more importantly, I think it's going to become more tangibly measurable as we go forward because of all the technologies that are going into place. And I think the age of AI will also allow us to bridge some of those, what I'll call inefficient operations functions, which used to kind of separate out the organizations together, right? Plus, of course, software like what Mike Nee works on.
Well, I mean, I hate to make this boring, but it's hard not to agree with what John and Abhi just said. I think the one thing I would push on John, which is, clearly what Abhi said. Yes, we need to think about the overall experience and how that moves across the entire buyer journey and breaks down some of the silos. Is absolutely already happening, and we see that in RevOps. But I actually also want to tune in on one thing John said, which is Chief Market Officer. I mean, one of the roles I got pushed into was Chief Growth Officer. And really, it was the CEO recognizing that someone has to be looking at what are the vectors of growth and how do I think about the long-term strategy, even as we look at how do we close and continue to move revenue. I think that's another dimension that starts looking at what are the type of skills and therefore what are the types of tools or approaches that each are going to have to bring to the table to actually think about the full go-to-market engine.
I think it's an interesting way of putting it, right? The notion of it, and we'll go a little bit off on this. So what's the different, how would you define it, Mike, the difference between marketing and growth?
Well, I mean, this is where, when you think about growth, you're thinking, not this quarter or maybe not even next quarter. You're thinking about what markets are we in? What's the insight that says where we win, where we won't, and how we're going to make money there. And I think this is where marketing is looking at a little bit earlier. I mean, it's really what marketing should have been doing, frankly. And I think it's a little bit of recognition that, with the set of tools we have, we're actually able to expand the remit a little bit broader as well. I don't know, John, what do you think? Am I interpreting a little bit what you were saying properly?
Yeah, and maybe to build, to specifically define Chief Market Officer, because we've talked about it, but we haven't defined it.
Yes.
Right. So if you think about it, marketing is the only CXO level function that's named after the tactical job function and not the output, right? We don't have a chief financing officer or a chief selling officer, right? So, effectively, the question is, should the most senior marketing leader be responsible for being the voice of the market? That's ultimately what we're talking about here. Maybe to sort of, put it another way, reframing it to focus on the domain and not the activity of marketing. But I want to make one other point, which is I don't really care what you call yourself, right? Like if all the CMO does and say, I'm now a chief market officer, yay, you
do
fail.
The same crap.
Yeah, you fail.
Give me some more MQLs.
Right. The only reason to do this is to have the strategic conversation about what is the role of this department and this function. And are we the tactical MQL creators and party throwers? Or are we actually a strategic driver of long-term growth by representing the customer in the market? That's the conversation to have. If the title can just be a forcing function to have the conversation, then so be it.
I think this answer does change a little bit depending on the type of marketing organization you're looking at. Okay, let's just take, for example, B2B SaaS. Okay, since we're talking about B2B marketing out here. It was an interesting report that we've all seen here, but Canalys recently said that 50% of all SaaS sales are going to happen through hyperscaler marketplace in the next couple of years by 2027. Okay, whether you believe it or not, whether it's 50% or 40% or 30%, the point is that it's a entirely different type of way in which you kind of prosecute that particular journey for a customer who's looking to buy in that manner, or how you might work side by side with the hyperscaler salespeople. I went through this journey at Qualtrics. We are going through this journey at the companies I'm working on, and it changes from company to company. So in that particular case, what role does marketing play? That's fundamentally different than somebody who might be actually somebody that you go after from an outbound perspective, or somebody who might be coming directly to your website. And I think, coming back to how you face off to the market, I think it does depend on meeting the buyer in the preferred mode of their buying journey and where they are. So I think it's hard to kind of place one particular title on that particular. Is that market? I'm okay with that if that's what John wants to call it. I don't see any reason why not to. I like the analogy of the sales officer not being called a selling officer, a finance officer not being called a financing officer. But I think that misses the point of the fact that you're going to have to be many things to many people in different channels. That's not different from before, except those channels actually have gotten incredibly powerful relative to what is to exist. I'd like to kind of see what people think about that.
Actually, I like what you're saying there. You brought up the notion of marketplaces, right? As a way to offer your product. And in this world, and I think one of the things John recently talked about in his latest update about thoughts about 2024 and what's coming in 2025 is about the notion of AI agents that are on the buying and the selling side. And then you bring up the notion of marketplaces, right? These hyperscaler marketplaces that in many ways resemble like an Amazon marketplace, but for tech. So, I mean, relate that to how we as marketing folks or market folks should drive our go-to-market strategy. Are there mistakes we're making today that we ought to think about for correcting for the future? How do we think about it?
I mean, there are many mistakes that start from not understanding the customer and not aligning with sales and a whole bunch of mistakes. But I think, I've alluded to where I think the most fundamental mistake comes in, which is in our drive to achieve short-term metrics like MQLs. I think we all too often do things that are not in the interest of the long-term customer relationship. Things like gating content, things like hiding our pricing, things like, bombarding customers with lots of emails, or bringing the sales development function. Just because somebody attended a webinar, they start getting, put into a sequence with a whole bunch of emails that they don't want to get. These things don't build relationships; they burn them. And it's that short-termism focus at the expense of doing what's right for the customer in the long term that is hurting our ability to actually achieve the revenue growth we all want.
Well, it's reflective of a little bit of how we measure. It gets back to what Abhi was saying earlier. I mean, we've been measured not only in silos between sales and marketing, email marketers, events, right? Every one of them had tools that just optimized for their own set of view. And the question is, how are we breaking that, John? I agree with you. I mean, these are mistakes, but it's buried into the explosion of RevTech we have, and frankly, the type of data we now have underneath that.
Yeah, I mean, and by the way, I should acknowledge my role in the current state of the situation, right? I mean, like the marketing automation tools of today.
You're the sequence king. I mean, you're the email marketing sequence
and I wrapped
king.
everything around Engagio. Just put it that way. I've always used everything you did.
Literally, the marketing automation tools of today are largely responsible for the short-term, gumball machine mentality of marketing, that exists today. Yes, the metrics and the tech of today are at fault.
But I think you got to look back to where we were, right? I think it's as in all things swing to the extremes and then need to be moderated back. We were at a point in which marketing was not well measured. Okay. And the rise of digital, the rise of channels like what, John pioneered actually made it very measurable. Okay. And then we went the other extreme of like everything to be measured. And I was laughing when I saw John's prediction of the gumball machine, budget in, MQL out. It went to the point where it's gone the other extreme, and every SDR has to follow up, and then person must respond to that. And, I personally am sick of getting a message from an SDR saying, let's connect for mutual benefit. I'm like, I'm sorry, there is no mutual benefit. I've been in the business for 30 years. You guys got out of school 30 days ago. There is no mutual benefit out here. All right. But it's caused by the need for them to kind of get those metrics that John was talking about, the gumball, or what Mike was talking about. And I personally think that, this situation is going to be even worse. And we'll talk about AI in a second. But if we don't change the process, AI is going to make it easier and easier to hit us all 100 times over, and then everything's going to shut down. Okay, so the process has to change.
Totally. I love this because a lot of times I'll sit there and talk to CMOs, and no matter how smart they are, they'll get back to, well, my organic's doing this and my email's doing that and my paid is not working, blah, blah, blah. So if traditional B2B demand generation playbook is failing, right? And so why are so many companies clinging to it? What's going to get them to let go?
I think change takes time. Change is hard. The problem is that we've spent 10 years teaching CFOs, CEOs, private equity investors that this is the way you should think about and measure marketing.
Right.
And so it's really hard for a CMO, to go up to Vista Equity who says, every month fill out the sheet of the number of MQLs you generated, and just tell them, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that because that's bad marketing. This is going to take some time to change.
Yes.
Well, not only that, but Rajiv, you asked what mistake did marketers make? We're actually doubling down on that mistake this year. I mean, if you think about 2024, AI moved from sort of experimentation and we're really executing with it now. But what are we using? ChatGPT, Jasper, Adobe Sensei, right? We're starting to power like content and automate campaigns and predictive outcomes. I mean, I remember we bought my first ML marketing automation, like to bolt onto our product, 90s, right? We've been doing this for a while, but the problem is every one of these things we add, we actually further silo our data. Each one of these, every copilot, every tool is actually further fragmenting the data and therefore the experience for the customers and the relationship that John is trying to optimize towards.
Yeah, I think sometimes a back to the basics approach, which goes back to what are we actually trying to do fundamentally, right? You're trying to basically engage with a person who might be interested in your product, hopefully informed with something that tells you, as we were saying earlier, who that ideal customer for your product should be. See if they're interested. If they are interested, get them the right sets of information along the way. And when they're ready to engage with you, have them talk to a person who might resolve the issue. It could be an agent. It could be a human being, right? But that's what we're fundamentally trying to do. And going back and remapping the hash of the tools that are right now killing you with hyper fragmented, metrics along the way that, John has said has gotten embedded now in the private equity playbook and the, CFO playbook, makes it very hard for people to rise above that, right? The question is, how do we do that?
Yep. And I think the other thing that we haven't really talked about why this is so essential, right? There's this rule of thumb, the 95-5 rule, right? That says at any point in time, only about 5% of your market is in market to buy your products. Just to remind everybody, that is not based on research. That's just based on a back of the envelope calculation based on average sales cycles times. So whether it's 3% or 5% or 10%, that doesn't matter. The point is most of your target market is not looking to buy right now. And so if you market to them as if they are, you're going to alienate them. Right. So the first thing we have to recognize is that our goal isn't necessarily to say, hey, are you interested? Do you want a meeting? Are you interested? Right. Our goal is to start to build long-term awareness and preference, which connects up to the other stat I want to share. Sixth Sense recently released their buyer survey study, which basically found that 80% of the time, buyers have already picked their preferred vendor before contacting sales.
Yep.
Right. And so the decisioning is happening before we even think there's a sales cycle going on. Trust Radius had some research. 78% of the buyers chose products that they were aware of before they started the research. And that number goes to 86% for enterprise buyers. So we're in this interesting conundrum as marketers, right? Which is the traditional marketing of like, hey, are you interested? Right? Doesn't work because it alienates them. While at the exact same time, if we haven't created awareness and preference for our solution before they start the buying cycle, we've basically already lost.
So are you suggesting then that one of the metrics we should be driving for are much more brand centric, much more like CPG centric, where it's about gaining awareness, delivering content, educating folks, but not having those strict metrics like we typically have?
100%. Awareness, engagement need to sort of become, I think, top level CMO metrics that we talk about, which can be quantified, right? It can be quantified with market research, customer surveys. I was talking to the CMO of a company who is primarily a PLG-oriented company, a B2C consumer product that has been trying to build their enterprise business. And the number one thing they care about is, do you think of this company as an enterprise solution? Right? And so, you know what? They can survey that and they can measure that quarter over quarter over quarter. And the CMO told me, I would rather spend money on that than one extra trade show.
All right. So there's more of your share of voice kind of metric, right? So share of voice, aided, unaided, right? So that's more of a CPG, that's more of a consumer based metric, right? So, and that brings to the rise the notion of reaching out to influencers. So now if you're trying to reach out to influencers because that's how, like you talked about, John, 80% of people or 70% of people, or Forrester was like, 67% of people have researched know about you before they come to you. So how do you identify them? How do you engage with them? How do you create is this a lot about partnering? Not just doing sponsored content, right? But it's a lot more than this.
Yeah, and we need to think about it, especially going forward. We're entering a world where AI is going to be disintermediating our ability to talk to customers, whether it's summarizing our inbox or zero-click search or AI buying agents, that are actually going out and doing the research. So to build this brand awareness, I think it really has to start with what are things that AI cannot summarize. And I think that's going to come down to a couple of things: experiences, relationships, and included in relationships are things like partners and influencers. Put another way, the source of the information is going to become probably more important than the actual information, right? We already see that in how people consume their news, and it's increasingly going to be important in sort of how we consume information for business. So you have experiences, you have relationships, and then I do think there's going to be still an opportunity for communities, which again, frankly, is kind of a form of relationships, and original content. Content becomes cheap in the age of AI. Anybody can generate a blog post, but something that's truly original and valuable will, I think, continue to stand out, partly because AI can't summarize it if it doesn't exist yet.
This is great. So I'm going to throw this one to Mike. So Mike, because I know you love the engineering behind this stuff. So John has proposed, and he's reflecting what he sees. AI buying agents become more prevalent, right? And so now the B2B marketing battle, is it becoming a battle for the algorithm? So how does it affect content and messaging? So there's, I think, John, you talked about having two types, a two-tiered capability. One is the notion of machine readable AI agent content, and then you have experiences that you're creating. So how does this affect content and messaging in this new type of environment?
Well, it's interesting because I think there's, data quality over quantity on one side. I mean, one thing that's going to happen is you don't know who's actually on your site sometimes. And for a period of time, you don't know what's a bot versus a human. And so how are you actually really starting to delineate these things? And, in third-party data, we know is getting harder and harder to differentiate around. So the question is now, if you're going to have the right ability to not only respond to humans to create the right engagement, as well as to respond to the agents, you really have to be much more effective about your own data and the quality of that data. I'm going to parrot Abhi, who I think at the last time I heard him speak, his rule, or the new golden rule, is he who has the data makes the rules. And in this case, it's not just the data itself, but think about how you start capturing the context around every one of those engagements. So you can say, what are the algorithms that the buyer agents are starting to use that actually are most recognizable? I mean, you're still now having to do very similar work, but now you're profiling different types of people, and the agent just becomes another type of buyer. Don't just use a word like context. That's right. You can't just use a word. Give me an example of context. Well, clearly there's, when we think about data, people think about attribution, but really it's trying to capture all the context around that touch point, whether it was channels, whether it was around the touch points, the preferences that we want to get to. But also just what, where are they, like you said, in the other things they're looking at? Because there's so many other pieces of how the agents are going to start putting together what the buyer wants that you just have to start interpreting as well. And there's going to be a wide variety of them, just like there's customers today. And the question is, how do you make sure you understand, one, who's the agents and who are real people? And then actually make sure that your first party data is actually able to be leveraged to be able to better actually start understanding that whole journey. And that is just an incredible amount of data that we're starting to see people invest in. I mean, you see the re-rise of CDPs of last year and a half, or composable CDPs.
All right, Mike, what's a CDP? Help us with a CDP. Actually, I'm going to make Abhi explain to us what a CDP is. Go for it.
CDP is a customer data platform. Look, it's basically fundamentally just a way to kind of understand and compile all the information about your customer, how they interact with you, worked with you. Whether you call it a CDP, you call it a data lake, you call it a composable CDP, it doesn't really matter. It comes back fundamentally to what John said. It's like coming back to basic principles about where is that customer. I think one of the things you have to do is something we've talked about before, Rajiv, is the segmentation of intent. Instead of following the mechanistic intent that John talked about. Oh, you check this out, give us a call, form a meeting, let's go. How about you try and understand? Exactly. How about you try and figure out what is that intent, sub-segmenting intent into fine slices, by the way, and you can start doing that based on AI that is trained to take a look at the way the person is interacting with you. And if it's true, as John said earlier, that people have already made a decision before and they know whom they're going to buy, then the whole exercise is an exercise in justifying their buy. Okay, if that's going to happen, you're going to have two things. One is, what are the ways in which you become that justified decision beforehand? And the second side, if you're trying to break in, is, okay, what are the kind of things that are going to help me break the incoming assumption that that's the buy and all I need to do is give them a bunch of specs they can compare against? Even the notion of RFIs kind of starts to kind of break down, right? Because an RFI, you can say automate the process of RFI. That's what people say. I'm like, why would you have an RFI? An agent can compile all the elements of an RFI by going out and collecting what you have. So the question is, as John said earlier, like what can you measure? What can you not measure? But the what can you not measure does have to break out in a significantly different way. And I think the only way you can start doing that is through partnerships, is through truly groundbreaking thought leadership events. That's why he kind of said brand-like. So it's not quite brand, but it's brand-like elements to establish yourself in the justified buy. But then you also have to think of the counter, which is, how do I break it? Otherwise, you would say, John, if I follow that as natural end, 75 to 80% of the time, you have no chance of winning because all they're doing is putting you through a song and dance to justify buying whom they've already chosen. So you really have to focus in on which side of the equation you might be in, right? And play the game both ways.
Okay, so an RFI is a request for information, right? So to our listeners, an RFI is, as a company, I want to learn about, I'm engaging in an area that I want to change as part of my company. I want to put in a new system. I want to put in AI potentially for my customer support department. I'll put out a RFI, request for information from main vendors in the industry, and ask them to comment on it. And so maybe that's something that AI can do for me as an agent going out and requesting it. And I can have receiving agents on my side that deliver it.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So you can have that. But then that doesn't mean the agent is going to buy. The agent's only going to collect information. So you still have to get to the buyer.
You can influence to the point that Mike made earlier. If you kind of have an understanding of intent, and if as John said, if you are in that favored set versus unfavored set, you got to figure out what answers the agents are exchanging. Not the way they're not truthful, but the exchange of information from the agents has to be managed in such a way that that which your previous customers have told you is particularly well differentiated, and find a way to land that with the buying agent. Okay, your information agent or your selling agent has to be very, very, very thoughtful about that. And that only comes through a deep understanding of your customers and what really matters to them.
Any examples of that today? Like, there's AI products out there today. There's go-to-market of those AI products. Any examples of this happening to help our viewers, listeners?
I think it's more coming. I think I alluded to zero-click search.
Yeah.
Right. Where, now you don't have to go click through the website to see, the AI is going to summarize it for you. And I think we're going to see that more and more in our email inboxes, where hey, here's the emails you need to pay attention to. Right. I think a full buying agent where you just say, I'm looking for a new finance solution, go, research all the options, talk to the selling agents, negotiate initial pricing for me, and come back with a rank list of recommendations. That's years away. Mm-hmm. Right. But the point is, it is coming.
Yeah, I'm going to argue that it's actually not going to be that far away, because you're seeing the composition. They won't be one agent, right? Basically, fundamentally, it's going to be a swarm of agents, each of whom is going to be broken down into little pieces. You're going to have a coordinating agent. One person is going to just say, here's your damn template. Go collect all the data. That basically goes there. Poof goes the RFI, by the way, the request for information. You're not going to be asked for it. You better make sure your website is architected in such a way, or your information piece architected and labeled in such a way that you make it super easy to be gathered. Okay. The second one might say, hey, here's the criteria, score everything against the criteria, so that the little information agent passes that to a scoring agent. The scoring agent will have been trained by your people. By the way, that might be just a process where you have a buying committee, and the agent interviews the buying committee to actually profile their areas. And by the way, I'm saying some of this because I have seen a lot of stealth companies in this area. I just can't say who they are or what they're doing, but it's actually happening right now. And the third one says, okay, go ahead and based on what you heard from the buying committee, score all of these people and tell us what the follow-up questions should be. At that point in time, it's a very different game that we're playing right now. I think this is going to happen, frankly, within the next 2.5 years. It's not going to be like 3 years or 4 years.
But
maybe
talk
2
about
years.
a different type of product, because there's a spectrum of products here, and the level of definition. Like we saw the old marketplaces back in the 90s, right? Where the level of specification on steel or other products like that allows you to have marketplaces with an interchangeability. We're talking about, different solutions now, and how do we have that gradation, which I think is somewhere between where John and you are speaking to, because you may have a short list, but you're still going to need to engage to really understand what you guys need to use at the nuance with the questions, like you said, that the machines are telling you what to ask.
But the difference is that the scoring is calculated not by one specific, like a simple scoring sheet. Remember how you had to go fill out those moronic lists? It's focused on the intent of the buying committee, which the algorithm has sussed out. Okay, on that dimension, it comes back with, we think this is the best matches. Here's why. And when it comes to marketplaces, Mike, you're right. Marketplaces have always existed. But when I was talking about marketplaces and the hyperscaler marketplace, what is different out here is these ridiculously large commitments that customers are making to these buyers. And then you're getting them to burn down those commitments. That's never existed. When the budget is already allocated somewhere else, your budget is allocated to somebody else who then needs to release it on behalf of you. So there's some slightly different dynamics. Yes, there's versions of these things that have happened in the past, but they're variants. That's just my perspective.
I love this. Okay, in your view, what is the most interesting innovation outside of AI that you're seeing in go-to-market?
I think that there are, some companies really starting to experiment with interesting experiences. I think, this is ranging from people, obviously, there's the steak dinner that's been around forever.
Omakase at AJ's house.
Oh, and then there's fancy versions of that.
Growth Marketing Summit by Position Squared.
I think the Growth Marketing Summit is actually a really good one to talk about. Because, at least the one I went to, you took everybody to Salt Lake City, and we basically lived together in a house for a couple of days. And we did some learning together, but we also did some skiing together and hanging out together. And I came back from that event and I told my friends or my wife, it felt as much like hanging out with my friends as it did going to a work conference. And I think that's gold. That's exactly what you want. You developed an experience that AI will never summarize. B2C companies have spent the last 10 years investing in interesting experiences, whether like their immersive exhibits or, and whatnot. I think it was one of the email vendors, it might have been MailChimp. They put together basically an interactive museum, that basically was called like Email is Dead. Right. And it was, but it was like the candy museum or the ice cream museum. If you go into these places where like each room is like Instagrammable and you like do stuff. Right. So that was like a B2B version of creating just an experience. So I think there's early innovation happening there. And I think there'll be more innovation, coming.
Well, I think there's always interesting things we can steal from the B2C side, because they have been thinking about this for a long time. I think about Rajiv, like a couple of years ago, I think you and I actually worked together on the personalization, B2C personalization. So we work with customers like, Tiffany's and Saks, as well as Walmart, right? So we had the whole spectrum of how do you personalize these experiences at scale. And what's interesting here is it's like a playbook of, how many experiences do you have available at what stage of where they are in the journey, and making smart selections based upon the information you have at that point in time. Stream-based architecture is a lot of that underneath. I'm getting a little geeky. I apologize. You're really talking about this whole playlist of different experiences that can be put together dynamically based upon what you detect of where they're at. And I think that this is where you see some players trying to put together basic infrastructures to do this in the B2B world, but the tools they have today have been holding them back. So, we've been working with folks at Rippling, and they've gone into that whole Scott Brinker architecture, frankly. Snowflake-based centralized data. OpenPrize is that data orchestration layer, which is really that automation and really helping you connect now best of breed components. They end up using different types of AI or email engines or whatnot, so they can craft high velocity, really different experiences based upon what they detect from 20 different external vendors of data. And how do you do this at scale? And you're starting to see real innovators put together pieces of the machinery that we saw more in the B2C world, but for B2B. And we're going to see, I think, more of this as vendors start coming up with solutions that can deliver this out of the box.
So Rajiv, going back to what we were talking about earlier, I really love the analogy that John used about the position squared Park City trip, because at Qualtrics, we had a very steep pyramid. Okay, at the very top, tippy top, were the people that we considered both very large potential customers and prospects, but also thought leaders, like people you'd want to be associated with, right? And that's what leads to the kind of experience that John talked about. Because if you do this right and you do this in a way that is not overly geared towards kind of selling your product, but really create and curate an experience where birds of feather hand, they will sell each other, frankly. Okay. And it happens at a deep emotional level, not just at a transactional level, which is what I think John was referencing. The problem is you can't manage these experiences. So thinking of how to layer them down. So we had those, it was in Park City, it was in Utah, right? Because it was Qualtrics. But then we had a series of these kind of step down events that went all the way down, right? And if you look at, for example, again, taking a page from the consumer side, if you look at what some of the work that has been done by some of the Korean food companies that are kind of capitalizing the K-pop craze night now, they've been doing some amazing experiential marketing in the US. What can we learn from that? Or take Mike's example. You could have AI just go and say, I'll find a way to bug you even more by having an automated SDR now. I'm like, great, perfect. Instead of like a kid bugging me, now I'm going to have like an AI agent that never tires bugging me. Or you could go down the Mike route and saying, hey, let's use the AI agent to figure out pieces of data, perhaps get into that fine subsegment of intent and where in that buying journey you are, which is what John was referencing, and only find a way to give you that which you need in that process, because you have such a deep understanding of your customer, what they've done before, how people have progressed, and where this particular customer is.
I'm going to insert myself because I think Abhi hit something very, very cool. And I'm going to use the example with Burberry's, which was a customer of ours, which it applies, right? Because what they decided was friction was good. Friction was where the brand is created. Friction is good. Because if you want to buy socks, go to Amazon. Frictionless experience. If you want to create a relationship, if you want to create brand, it exists in the friction. Where do you slow someone down? So in terms of Burberry's, did they get you to a cross-sell upsell? Or did they want you to know that at this point in time, this is a point to introduce the weft and the weave, the history behind the tartan at bar? Because then when you make the purchase, that experience has actually carried you into now a sustaining customer. How do you grow with them? Because they know, they have the data that if you actually were educated in certain points of the experience, you actually stuck around and bought more. The cross-sell was much more natural. And I think this is some of the experience that John's trying to talk about. The issue has always been, though, for B2B, volume and actually measuring the brand connection to how did that contribute to funnel. And I think that is the unspoken question we haven't touched upon here at all. Not to say we'll get there. That's a big one. But I think this is where we're starting to see some really interesting innovation. And we're going to see things like this based upon what we've been talking about today.
All right, we have this really fun section here where we're going to talk about go-to-market tactics in 2025. And John Miller, our thought leader, has written a great article in Marketing Profs, and we're going to link it to our show notes. But we're going to paraphrase a few of them, and all three of our wonderful guests are going to give you one line about each one. Okay, here we go. Number one, the most effective B2B marketers in 2025 will be those who can seamlessly integrate AI into their workflows while retaining the core values of human connection and creativity.
Absolutely. I agree with that. Easier said than done.
That was exactly what I was going to say. Sorry, I should have said it first, damn it.
Come on, Mike, jump faster. Go, John.
And I would say, that's, I think, a too strong a statement. I think in 2025 that people can, as long as you're focused on doing right by the customer, even if you're not incorporating AI into your workflows, that's going to be okay, because it's a long-term trend, not a short-term.
It's a vision. Okay, next one. AI will replace most, but not all, marketing and sales jobs within the next 5 years.
Don't agree. I think that it's not a great time to be a junior salesperson, like an SDR. If all you do is, follow up on inbound lead forms, not so good. But, as we sort of talked about, ironically, the changes to buying that AI is driving is making things like experiences and relationships and brand and human connections more important, not less important.
Absolutely agree. I think the research we see, especially on the sales side, is accelerated and offloaded parts of work they used to do. But the relationship side is just going to be much more expected because more sellers are able to spend time. And I totally agree with John.
I actually think that it is going to replace a lot more jobs than we are acknowledging out here, folks. I think what's going to happen is going to change the shape of the organization. And while you could say it doesn't eliminate it, I guarantee you sales and marketing is 30-40% lighter than they are today. So that is job elimination. Call it what you will. And I think a lot of that work, there is going to be no such role as the, hyper segmented sale passing you off between 6 people. Thank God for that, by the way. And AI is going to replace all of that. You're going to come in for the final kill. So you better know what you're talking about or get out of the way.
All right. Love these answers. Next one. Traditional marketing metrics such as MQLs are outdated and no longer relevant in the age of AI buying agents. Remember, 2025. Companies need to adopt new metrics that reflect engagement with AI audiences.
So not going to happen in 2025, guys. I mean, as much as Abhi loves it, I think that when last time I spoke to the Forrester for folks covering this, 92% of their customers still use MQLs. It's very hard to move off of. The shift towards buying groups, account centricity, these are things that are still on the wish list that are for the more sophisticated customers. And so you need to add the metrics, but it's not going to replace the metrics in the next 2025.
It's the trend. That we will be moving away from MQLs and towards new metrics. The new metrics won't just be qualified agent interactions or QAIs. That might be one, but we also will be measuring, some of the sort of brand awareness and preference metrics that we talked about as well for the humans.
Yeah. So much as I would love to see some of this happen earlier, I do agree that change takes time. But I do think that something that's what I call DOE, depth of engagement, okay? Intensity of engagement.
Yes.
And super fine segmentation of intent is going to start to find a way to get appended to those MQLs. But for the time being, we are still in the world of the MQL, folks. Make no mistake. Don't rush out to try and kill it, because your CFO won't allow it, and neither will your PE firm. So yeah, we can hope to make it better.
me love intent segmentation. Okay, growth, product-led growth. Here's a controversial one. Product-led growth, PLG, is a failing strategy. The future of B2B sales lies in a return to sales-led approaches.
Don't agree. I think this entirely has to be answered in the context of the kind of product you're selling in the ACV. If you're selling Canva, product-led growth is a wonderful strategy. And I don't think that goes away. And if anything, it ties into all the research that says buyers want self-service possibilities whenever possible.
And I think that what we see is that it's product-led and sales-led for higher margin, especially if you have something that is a little more platform-oriented. And so you do need to have those entry points. And it's a great combination. I think Elastic has really shown that to be a truism on that.
Nice.
Yeah, this is called product-led sales.
Yep.
Love it. Great. Next one. Building a strong brand is more important than ever in a world dominated by AI-generated content. Companies need to invest heavily in creating authentic and memorable brand experiences.
Yes, some of them may need to be offline. Otherwise, you get back into the issue of AI again, summarizing everything for you.
I wonder, Abhi, if this doesn't get back to just what strategy you choose, though. You may have to just be the low-cost producer here and understand that there's a level of disintermediation and commoditization is going to happen at some level, and you just have to choose your segment.
Actually, Mike, I think that's a really, really good point, right? Commodity low-cost products will be completely bought and sold by AI agents talking to each other. And that's fine. And you're right. I've been talking about, more differentiated, higher value products, but absolutely you're right.
And some of those could be your entry points. Your PLGs could be easily sold via some of these early categories.
Sure. Yeah. But Mike, I'll say it's not just low price. I think it's also highly automated that know how to work with agents, where low price will be a component, but massive automation is the other aspect.
Agreed. And PLG plus.
Yeah. Got it. Sorry, interesting analogy, right? Today, our agents are already buying our Google ads, where dynamically they are negotiating the price of what we're going to pay, instantaneously. It's just called Google AdWords.
True.
Right. But, why can't we buy other quote unquote commodity high distribution products, with a similar model? That's a great point, Abhi.
The rise of AI buying agents will lead to a shift towards value-based pricing models. Companies that cling to seat-based pricing will struggle to compete.
So we went through this thinking at my last company at Qualtrics, and we're looking at this right now at Samano. We're helping out. I think it's going to be a combination of subscription-based and consumption-based. Anybody who sticks to strictly seat-based, it might work for a few areas, but I think you're going to have to blend seat-based and consumption-based. I think there's some areas that go all consumption-based. Some areas go to a combination of seat and consumption. I think purely seat-based is in trouble.
Sounds like a telco model. And I agree with what Abhi said. We're going to see different combinations where, seat and consumption, but consumption in blocks as well.
Love it. Last question. Before we go to the game, the majority of B2B purchases in 2025 will happen through self-service channels like websites and online marketplaces. Companies who fail to adapt to this shift risk falling behind.
There's a lot of context built into that word majority in what you just said. Are we talking about dollar volume or transaction count, et cetera, et cetera? But, to net, no, I don't think so. Like it just, when I just think about the amount of buying, right? It's PLG is important, but they're probably, especially on dollar volume, it's still dominated, I think, by direct sales.
Especially with the level of risk people are taking on a lot of these purchase of software, they're going to want to have that relationship, and the experience will matter.
Yeah, Rajiv, my answer is it's not binary. The experience of buying is omni-channel. I went through this at AT&T when I was the head of digital. We had multi-million-dollar sales where the contract might be signed in person, but most of the buying and purchasing actually happened online. So that's an omni-channel journey.
So it could be a combo, all the stuff happens offline, but then you may pump it through a private offer on a marketplace.
Well, increasingly agent-driven. They're going to help guide that buying process and that selling process.
I love it. Okay, this part's the fun part. If you haven't had fun already, I want to welcome John, Abhi, and Mike to the Shark Tank, where top-tier AI experts go head-to-head. This is where 3 C-level marketers are forced to fire up those neural networks and battle for strategic brilliance. This is where cutting-edge AI strategies clash, and only the most innovative approaches reign supreme. Get ready for the ultimate fighting AI showdown where only one emerges as the champion of the AI revolution.
Dun, dun,
so this
dun.
is like, it's going to be like 2 truths and a lie. Okay, it's 2 truths and a lie. But I'm going to read you 3 statements. 2 of them are true. 1 is a lie. You've got to pick out which one is the lie. I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1, and you're going to have to show your answer as your finger so that you can't cheat off each other like you've been doing all throughout this podcast. So here we go. Round 1.
One finger is true, 2 is lie?
1 is, I'm going to give you 3
answers.
3 answers.
And we're putting the number of the lie. Okay.
Here's round number 1. A neural network was trained on recipes for magic potions from fantasy books and they used that knowledge to generate new, potentially functional potions. That's number 1. Number 2, researchers are using AI to analyze the communications patterns of dolphins with the hope of eventually building a translation device. And number 3, an AI-powered system can predict the outcome of Supreme Court cases with 95% accuracy by analyzing the text of legal documents and the judge's past decisions. So first is the recipes for potions. Number 2 is about a dolphin translator. And number 3 is about predicting Supreme Court cases. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I have John at 1, Abhi at 3, and Mike at 3. All right, for this round, Abhi and Mike win. Sorry, John.
I knew the dolphin one was true.
All right.
I knew the dolphin one was true, and I just know there's just so many MIT nerds where I went that someone would have created that potion creation tool.
Surprised no one's done 3.
And the one was too obvious. Like that's what I wanted to say was false, but my brain said it can't be that simple.
All right, here we go. Round 2. AI is being used to recreate the voices of people who have lost the ability to speak due to illnesses like ALS, allowing them to communicate with loved ones in their own voice. Number 2, a major Hollywood studio announced plans to create a blockbuster movie written entirely by AI with no human involvement in the script writing process. And number 3, AI algorithms are being used to compose personalized lullabies that adapt to a baby's cries in real time to soothe them more effectively. So 1 is recreate voices of people who've lost the ability to speak. Number 2 is a studio creating a movie entirely by AI. Number 3 is personalized lullabies. Ready?
It's a major studio?
It says a major Hollywood studio, says my notes. Ready? 3, 2, 1. All right. I got John and Mike agreeing with 2. Oh, Abhi is 2.
2.
All right. All right. All 3 of you are right. Congratulations. Number 2 is the lie.
You guys are 2-0. Pretty good.
Number 2 is the lie. So I got all 3 of you got this. So far, Abhi and Mike are still in the lead. John, unless we go to extra rounds, this is your chance to catch up. All right. Round 3. Number 1, an AI art generator was accidentally entered into a prestigious art competition and won first prize, fooling all the judges. Number 2, IBM announced it would pause hiring for roles that could be replaced by AI, potentially affecting around 7,800 jobs. Number 3, scientists have developed an AI system that can accurately predict earthquakes several days in advance by analyzing subtle changes in the Earth's magnetic field. Okay, AI art generator, fooling judges. Number 2, IBM laying off because of AI. Number 3, an earthquake predicting system. 3, 2, 1. Okay, I have 2, John at 2, Abhi at 3, and Mike at 2. All right.
We're guaranteed to have a winner.
All right, 2, 3, 2. So the winner is none of you. Number 1 is the correct one. An AI art generator was accidentally entered into a prestigious art competition and won first prize, fooling all the judges. That was the lie.
I heard something like that happen.
I could have heard like that. Yeah.
I swear we heard that one.
There may be something odd in the way. Maybe it didn't win first place. Maybe they're like trying to be a little bit too cutesy with the wording.
All right. So here we are. We are Mike and Abhi are tied for first place. So do you want to go to round 4 and see if we get an actual winner here? Number 1, a song entirely generated by AI featuring Drake and The Weeknd went viral and racked up millions of streams before being taken down due to copyright claims. Number 2, an AI program has been granted a patent for an invention that it designed independently, raising legal and ethical questions about AI intellectual property rights. And number 3, Universal Music Group successfully forced Spotify to remove all AI-generated music from its platform, arguing that it infringes on the rights of human artists.
Is that like successfully or just asking them?
Successfully forced Spotify to remove all AI-generated music from its platform.
I like how seriously Abhi's taking this.
I know. It's
The eyebrows of concern have really come in.
Versus this, right?
Like 10,000 days on Duolingo. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. All of them are, all of you are 2. All of you are wrong again. Okay, We're still tied. It was actually number 3. Universal Music Group did that. The first 2 were truths, and the last one was a lie. All right, round 5. So this is your chance to win.
I'm normally pretty good at 2 truths and a lie, and I'm whiffing pretty hard today.
So here's round 5. Number 1. The Trump campaign was found to have used AI to generate political ads that are specifically designed to trigger emotional responses in audiences, bypassing logical reasoning and increasing the likelihood of swaying opinions. Number 2, researchers have developed an AI system that can detect lies with over 90% accuracy by analyzing microexpressions and vocal cues. And number 3, AI is being used to generate personalized perfumes by analyzing an individual's scent preferences and their social media activity. This is for the win. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Different answers? Same answers? All right. It's a tie.
Are we right or wrong?
The answer is number 1 is the lie.
Damn it. What?
Yes.
Trump?
Even
So
Trump
believable.
wasn't clever enough to use AI to generate political ads.
You got most of these wrong.
You guys know the Monty Hall problem. If you're given the opportunity to switch, you always should switch.
So you guys did a great job.
Right.
I really appreciate you guys doing this with me today. This was fantastic. What a great way for us to go through what happened in 2024 and what's coming up. Thank you, John, for writing that wonderful thought piece that triggered all this. And it's so amazing to have you guys as experts here on the show. So thank you for joining the Spark of Ages.
Ton of fun.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All
And
right.
thank you, John, for creating this.
And putting up with
Take
us.
care, everyone.
Take it easy.
I just want to tell you how much fun this was for me. One of the great gifts I have in this world is I get to hang out with really, really bright people who, like me, are trying to figure out what makes change and what gets people to buy. And I get the thrill of connecting them together. And really, this came about a little bit surreptitiously based on a great idea from the F and Funny team. And it was amazing to have all three of these very accomplished executives together and entrepreneurs together to just talk about where they think things are going. And we can learn so much from it. You saw how we talk about consumer as well as B2B and how we borrow techniques from one place to the other, how we talk about AI and how that's blending in. But then there's the emotional context of how we need to still be human. We still need to connect to each other. We talked about our growth marketing summit. Yes, we focus on digital, but we know that to get people together, to get people to trust you, you still have to create emotional connections. And those emotional connections then bleed over to each other and they create great synergy. So humans still need to interact, even if we have these amazing AI tools to help us bring information together. So that's what I think was really powerful. And we will definitely have the link to John's amazing content. You can find it on LinkedIn. He's done a great job of really thinking it through as he does every year. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the pod, please take a moment to rate it and comment. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and everywhere podcasts can be found. The show is produced by Sandeep Parikh and Anand Shah, with production assistance by Taryn Talley, and edited by Sean Marr and Aidan McGarvey. I'm your host, Rajiv Parikh from Position Squared, an amazing AI-based leading growth marketing company based in Silicon Valley. You can visit us at position2.com. This has been an F and Funny production, and we'll catch you next time. And remember, folks, be ever curious.